The morning sun cast long shadows across the United Earth Assembly building as delegates from 47 different alien species gathered for their weekly council meeting. The building itself was a marvel of engineering, designed to accommodate the various atmospheric and gravitational needs of its diverse occupants. Some delegates floated in specialized gravity chambers, others breathed through mechanical filters, and a few existed as pure energy patterns within containment fields. Ambassador David Hayes adjusted his simple black suit and checked his notes one final time. Today marked exactly 1 year since humanity had been granted provisional membership in the Galactic Federation. The invitation had come as a surprise to most humans, who had only achieved faster-than-light travel 30 years earlier. Most other species in the Federation had been exploring the stars for thousands of years. The main assembly hall buzzed with conversation in dozens of different languages. Translators worked overtime to ensure everyone could understand each other. Hayes noticed how the other delegates naturally grouped together based on their species, creating invisible barriers throughout the massive room. The humans sat alone at table 47, right next to the emergency exit. High Chancellor Nexar of the Vorthak Empire called the meeting to order. His species looked like giant purple octopi with crystal formations growing from their heads. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of authority that came from ruling over 300 star systems. Fellow beings of the Federation, Nexar began, his words echoing through the hall's advanced sound system. Today we face our darkest hour. The reports from the Outer Rim are worse than we initially believed. The Shadow Plague has consumed 12 more worlds this month alone. A wave of nervous energy swept through the assembly. The Shadow Plague was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. It appeared without warning, consuming entire planets and leaving behind nothing but empty space. No one knew where it came from or how to stop it. Every attempt to study it had resulted in the loss of entire research fleets. Representative Kulak of the Reptilian Confederacy stood up, his massive form casting a shadow over several nearby tables. Our scientists estimate we have less than 6 months before the plague reaches the core worlds. Our combined military forces have proven useless against this threat. What about the Arcturian superweapons? Asked a delegate from the insectoid collective, her voice clicking and buzzing even through the translator. Ineffective, replied Admiral Zorax of the Centauri Defense Force. We launched our most powerful planet-killer missiles directly into a plague zone. They simply disappeared, consumed like everything else. The hall erupted in worried chatter. Hayes could see fear in the eyes of beings who had lived for centuries, species that had survived wars, natural disasters, and countless other threats. But this was different. This was something that attacked the very fabric of reality itself. Hayes stood up slowly and raised his hand. The chatter died down as hundreds of alien eyes focused on him. Many of the delegates had forgotten the humans were even present. High Chancellor, Hayes said, his voice clear and steady. Earth would like to volunteer our scientific and military resources to help find a solution to this crisis. The silence that followed was broken by what sounded suspiciously like laughter. Representative Vex of the Crystalline Unity, whose species had mastered interstellar travel when humans were still living in caves, spoke first. With all due respect, Ambassador Hayes, your species has been in space for barely 3 decades. What could you possibly contribute that we haven't already tried? More murmurs of agreement rippled through the assembly. Hayes felt the familiar sting of condescension that had marked most of humanity's interactions with the older civilizations. They treated humans like children playing with adult toys. Our technology may be primitive by your standards, Hayes replied calmly. But sometimes, a fresh perspective can reveal solutions that experience might overlook. Chancellor Nexar's crystalline formations glowed brighter, which Hayes had learned was a sign of amusement in Vorthak culture. Ambassador Hayes, the combined wisdom of 46 civilizations, some with histories spanning millions of years, has failed to find an answer. Your species hasn't even mastered quantum physics yet. That's exactly my point, Hayes said, surprising himself with his boldness. We don't know what's supposed to be impossible. The comment drew open laughter from several delegates. Admiral Zorax, a being that looked like a cross between a shark and a tree, gestured dismissively with one of his branch-like arms. Human optimism is admirable, but this isn't a problem you can solve with determination and good intentions. This is an extinction-level event that threatens every living thing in the galaxy. Dr. Sarah Chen, Earth's chief scientist and the only other human delegate present, stood up beside Hayes. Her voice was quiet but carried clearly through the hall's acoustics. What if we could get a sample of the shadow plague for analysis? The laughter stopped immediately. Representative Kulak's massive head swiveled toward the humans, his reptilian eyes narrowing. Impossible. Every ship that gets close enough to collect samples is consumed. We've lost 7 research fleets trying exactly that approach. But you've been using conventional ships, Chen replied. What if we used something the plague wouldn't recognize as a threat? Such as? Chancellor Nexar asked, his curiosity overriding his amusement. Chen smiled slightly. We have some ideas, but we'd need access to your historical databases and current research findings to develop a proper plan. The assembly buzzed with discussion. Hayes could see some delegates were intrigued, despite their skepticism. Others looked openly hostile to the idea of sharing their advanced knowledge with such a young species. Representative Vex's crystalline form shifted colors as he considered the proposal. Even if we agreed to share our research, which would be unprecedented, what makes you think your primitive science could succeed where ours has failed? Hayes looked around the assembly hall, taking in the incredible diversity of species that had come together despite their differences. Then he thought about Earth, about humanity's long history of surviving against impossible odds. Because, he said finally, we're the only species in this room that evolved as prey animals on a death world. Every other civilization here developed on paradise planets with perfect conditions. You've never had to learn how to fight for survival against overwhelming odds. The hall fell completely silent. Hayes could feel the weight of their attention, the mixture of offense and curiosity his words had generated. What are you saying? Admiral Zorax asked, his voice carrying a dangerous edge. I'm saying that when the rest of you see an impossible problem, you look for impossible solutions. When humans see an impossible problem, we look for the loophole, the weakness, the one thing everyone else missed because it seemed too simple or too crazy to work. Chancellor Nexar's crystals dimmed as he considered this. Finally, he spoke. Very well. The Galactic Federation will grant limited access to our research databases. You have 30 days to present a viable plan. If you fail, humanity's membership in this federation will be terminated permanently. Hayes felt his heart pounding as he realized what they'd just committed to. As the assembly broke up and the other delegates filed out, most avoiding eye contact with the humans, Chen leaned over and whispered, Dave, I hope you know what you're doing. We just promised to solve a problem that stumped the greatest minds in the galaxy. Hayes watched through the great windows as alien ships departed for their home worlds, probably to report that the humans had finally revealed their true foolishness. Sarah, he said quietly, human history is full of times when everyone said something was impossible right up until we did it anyway. Besides, they're all thinking like predators who've never really been threatened. Sometimes you need prey animals to spot the trap. As Earth's small delegation prepared to return home with the most important mission in human history, Hayes couldn't help but smile. The galaxy was about to learn something very important about the species they'd dismissed as primitive newcomers. Sometimes the newest member of the pack sees the things that experience has taught everyone else to ignore. The cafeteria on Research Station Omega buzzed with nervous energy as scientists from a dozen different species worked around the clock to understand the shadow plague. Steam rose from various food dispensers designed to accommodate different atmospheric needs, while holographic displays showed constantly updating data streams from across the galaxy. Dr. Emily Watson sat alone at a corner table, her laptop surrounded by paper notebooks filled with handwritten calculations. Most of the alien scientists used advanced quantum computers that could process information at speeds beyond human comprehension, but Emily preferred the slower, more deliberate process of working through problems by hand. The past 3 weeks had been a whirlwind of information downloads, briefings, and access to technologies that made human science look like children playing with rocks. The alien scientists had been polite but dismissive, sharing their research while making it clear they expected the humans to admit defeat soon. Emily looked up as her colleague Tom Bradley approached with 2 cups of coffee. The familiar, earthly smell was a welcome comfort in the sterile, recycled air of the space station. "Any luck with the quantum analysis?" Tom asked, settling into the chair across from her. "The alien computers are incredible," Emily replied, taking a grateful sip of coffee. "They can simulate entire star systems and predict particle behavior down to the quantum level, but I keep feeling like we're missing something obvious." Through the large viewing window, they could see several alien research vessels docked to the station. Each ship was a masterpiece of engineering, containing laboratories that could recreate any environment in the known galaxy. Yet none of them had been able to get within 1,000 kilometers of the shadow plague without being consumed. Dr. Keth, a tall, blue-skinned scientist from the Andorian Science Council, approached their table. His species had been studying the eye plague longer than any other, losing 3 entire research fleets in the process. "Dr. Watson," Keth said, his voice carrying the musical quality common to his people, "I've reviewed your preliminary analysis. Your approach is interesting, but I'm afraid you're making the same assumptions we all made initially." Emily looked up from her notes. "What assumptions?" "That the shadow plague is some form of advanced technology or biological weapon. We've been trying to analyze it as if it follows the same physical laws as everything else in the universe." "But it has to follow physical laws," Tom protested. "Everything does." Keth's large, dark eyes reflected a sadness that came from months of failed attempts. "That's what we all thought. But consider this. The plague doesn't just destroy matter, it erases it from existence. No debris, no energy signature, no trace that anything was ever there." Emily felt a chill run down her spine. "Complete annihilation?" "Worse. Our most advanced sensors show that space-time itself is being edited. It's as if reality is being rewritten to remove any trace of what the plague consumes." The implications hit Emily like a physical blow. If the plague could literally edit reality, then conventional physics wouldn't just be useless, it would be actively misleading. "Has anyone tried analyzing it from a completely non-physical perspective?" Emily asked. Both scientists looked at her with confusion. Tom frowned and asked, "What do you mean, non-physical?" "I mean, what if we stop thinking of it as a thing and start thinking of it as a process? What if it's not technology or biology, but something else entirely?" Dr. Keth's expression showed polite skepticism. "Dr. Watson, I appreciate creative thinking, but we need practical solutions. The plague will reach the core worlds in less than 10 weeks. Emily stood up suddenly, her chair scraping against the floor. "That's it. We've all been trying to solve this like it's an engineering problem. But what if it's not?" She hurried to the nearest computer terminal, her fingers flying over the unfamiliar alien interface. Tom and Keth followed, watching as she pulled up the most recent plague data. "Look at the pattern of consumption," Emily said, pointing to the holographic display. "Every species has been analyzing the what and the how, but none of you have asked the most important question." "Which is?" Keth asked. "Why? Why does the plague consume some things and not others? Why does it follow certain paths through space? Why does it seem to accelerate near-populated systems?" Tom leaned forward, beginning to understand where Emily was going. "You think it's making choices?" "I think it's not an it at all. I think it's a them." The alien scientist's skin color shifted to a deeper blue, which Emily had learned indicated stress in his species. "Dr. Watson, are you suggesting the plague is intelligent?" "I'm suggesting we've been looking at this backwards. Everyone's been trying to find a weapon or a disease or some kind of natural phenomenon. But what if the shadow plague isn't destroying civilizations? What if it's trying to save them?" The words hung in the air like a challenge to everything the galaxy's greatest minds had assumed. Dr. Keth's translator device struggled with Emily's rapid speech as she continued. "Think about it from a completely different angle. What if there's something coming that's so dangerous, so completely destructive, that the only way to save civilizations is to remove them from normal space-time entirely?" Tom stared at his colleague, with a mixture of admiration and concern. Emily, that's completely insane. Is it? Look at the data again. But this time assume the plague is trying to preserve what it takes, not destroy it. Look for patterns that support protection rather than destruction. Dr. Keth worked the alien computer systems with practiced ease, running new analyses based on Emily's suggestion. The results appeared almost immediately, and his skin color shifted to an even deeper shade of blue. This is unexpected, he said quietly. If I run the calculations assuming preservation rather than destruction, the plague's movement patterns begin to make sense. It's not following random paths through space. What's it following? Emily asked. It appears to be following the most efficient routes to reach the highest population centers first. But if the goal is preservation, then it's trying to save as many people as possible before something else gets to them. Tom finished. Emily felt a mixture of excitement and terror as the pieces began falling into place. We need to find out what it's saving them from, and we need to figure out how to communicate with it. Dr. Keth looked at the human scientist with something approaching respect for the first time since they'd arrived. Dr. Watson, if you're correct, then everything we thought we knew about this situation is wrong, but more importantly, if you're correct, then we may not be facing extinction. No, Emily replied, her voice quiet but firm. We may be facing something much worse, something so bad that being erased from existence is preferable to facing it directly. As the three scientists stood looking at the new data patterns, each lost in the implications of what they'd discovered, none of them noticed the subtle changes in the space around the research station. Reality itself seemed to shimmer slightly, as if something vast and incomprehensible had turned its attention toward their small corner of the universe. Emily's handwritten notes, scattered across the table where she'd been working, began to glow with a faint, otherworldly light. The simple human mathematics, scrawled in pencil on paper from Earth, had somehow resonated with forces beyond the understanding of the galaxy's most advanced civilizations. Outside the viewing window, the stars themselves seemed to flicker as if the universe was holding its breath. The shadow plague had noticed them noticing it, and for the first time since its arrival in their galaxy, it changed course. The emergency council session convened at midnight Galactic Standard Time, with delegates connecting from across the Federation via quantum communication links. The urgency in Chancellor Nexar's message had been clear. The shadow plague had done something unprecedented, and the humans were somehow involved. Ambassador Hayes sat in the Earth delegation's assigned spot, but this time he wasn't alone. Dr. Emily Watson had been transported directly from Research Station Omega, still wearing her lab coat and carrying the paper notebooks that had somehow changed everything. The main display showed real-time tracking of the shadow plague's movement, and what Emily saw made her heart race with both hope and terror. The plague had stopped its relentless advance toward the core worlds and was now moving in a completely different pattern, one that seemed almost like a dance. Explain this, Chancellor Nexar demanded, his crystal formations pulsing with agitation. For 6 months, the plague moved in straight lines, consuming everything in its path. Then your human scientist spends 3 weeks on our research station, and suddenly it changes its entire behavior. Representative Kulak leaned forward, his massive reptilian bulk making his chair creak ominously. Our military analysts believe this represents an escalation. The plague may now be actively targeting our research efforts. Emily stood up, her legs shaky from exhaustion and adrenaline. With respect, Representative Kulak, I don't think it's targeting anything. I think it's trying to communicate. The assembled delegates erupted in a mixture of scoffs and nervous chatter. Admiral Zorax's tree-like appendages rustled with what his species used to express disbelief. Communicate. Dr. Watson, that thing has consumed entire star systems. What could it possibly want to tell us? Emily activated her personal data pad, displaying the calculations she'd been working on for the past 72 hours without sleep. It's trying to tell us about something that's coming, something worse than anything we've ever imagined. She gestured to the main display where the plague's new movement pattern was becoming more complex by the hour. Look at the mathematical precision of its path. It's not random. It's creating a three-dimensional equation in space-time itself. Dr. Keth, participating via holographic projection from the research station, added his support. I've verified Dr. Watson's calculations. The plague's new trajectory follows mathematical principles that our most advanced civilizations discovered only recently, but it's implementing them on a galactic scale. Mathematics? Representative Vex's crystalline form shifted through several colors rapidly, indicating extreme agitation. You're telling us that a force of pure destruction is doing mathematics? Not destruction, Emily said firmly. Preservation. The equation it's creating isn't random. It's a warning system, like a lighthouse in a storm, and the storm it's warning us about is something we need to prepare for. Hayes could see that most of the delegates remained skeptical, but there was something different in their expressions now. The dismissive condescension was being replaced by grudging attention. What kind of storm? Chancellor Nexar asked. Emily took a deep breath before answering. Based on the mathematical models the plague is creating, something is coming from outside our galaxy. Something that doesn't just destroy civilizations, it unravels the fundamental forces that hold reality together. The chamber fell completely silent. Even the various atmospheric systems seemed to quiet as the implications of Emily's words sank in. Admiral Zorax was the first to speak. You're describing something that would be impossible to fight using conventional methods. Exactly, Emily replied. Which is why the plague isn't fighting it. It's relocating entire civilizations to pocket dimensions where they can survive until the threat passes. Representative Kulak's massive head shook slowly. Dr. Watson, what you're suggesting would require technology so advanced that it might as well be magic. No civilization, no matter how ancient, could create such a system. That's where you're wrong, Emily said. And for the first time since the crisis began, she smiled. It's not technology at all. It's evolution. The puzzled expressions on dozens of alien faces prompted Emily to continue. The plague isn't a weapon or a tool created by some advanced civilization. It's a naturally occurring defense mechanism that evolves in galaxies when they face this type of threat. Like an immune system, but on a cosmic scale. Dr. Keth's holographic form nodded agreement. The mathematical patterns support this theory. The plague shows characteristics of both artificial intelligence and biological adaptation, but it's actually neither. It's something entirely new. How can you be certain? Chancellor Nexar asked. Emily pulled out one of her paper notebooks and showed a hand-drawn diagram to the assembly. Because it responded to my calculations, not to our computers or our advanced sensors, but to simple mathematics written with graphite on processed tree pulp. It recognized the purity of basic mathematical truth. That's impossible, Representative Vex protested. Advanced beings would use quantum computation matrices, not primitive writing materials. But that's exactly the point, Hayes interjected, finally understanding what Emily had discovered. The plague doesn't recognize advanced technology because it's not looking for advanced technology. It's looking for mathematical truth in its purest form. Emily nodded enthusiastically. Every advanced civilization in the galaxy has moved beyond basic mathematics to quantum calculations and probability matrices. But mathematics doesn't become truer when it gets more complex. 2 + 2 = 4, whether you calculate it with sticks in the dirt or with quantum computers. The delegates began to murmur among themselves as the implications became clear. Are you saying, Admiral Zorax asked slowly, that human mathematical methods are somehow superior to our advanced systems? Not superior, Emily replied. Just more honest. When humans do math, we start with basic principles and build up. We don't skip steps or assume that complexity equals accuracy. Chancellor Nexar's crystals dimmed as he processed this information. Dr. Watson, if your theory is correct, then the approaching threat is something that none of our civilizations would be equipped to handle. Correct. But we might be able to help the plague save more people if we can learn to communicate with it properly. How? Representative Kulak asked. Emily held up her notebook. The same way I've been communicating with it. Simple, honest mathematics. No quantum computers, no probability matrices, Just basic truth written in the most primitive way possible. The chamber buzzed with discussion as delegates conferred with their advisors and military leaders. Hayes could see the mix of hope and fear in their expressions as they grappled with the possibility that their salvation might come from the galaxy's most primitive mathematical methods. Finally, Chancellor Nexar called for order. Dr. Watson, the Galactic Federation hereby authorizes you to attempt direct communication with the Shadow Plague using your methods. You will have the full resources of our combined civilizations at your disposal. Emily felt the weight of the galaxy settling on her shoulders. Thank you, Chancellor. But I need to be honest with you all about something. What? Hayes asked, though he was almost afraid to hear the answer. If I'm right about the approaching threat, then even if the plague saves billions of people in pocket dimensions, the galaxy as we know it is going to end. The mathematical models all point to the same conclusion. The silence that followed was broken by Representative Vex's quiet question. How long do we have? Emily looked at her calculations one more time, hoping she'd made an error somewhere. 6 weeks. Maybe 7 if we're lucky. The greatest military minds in galactic history suddenly found themselves depending on a human woman with a paper notebook to save them from something that shouldn't be possible. The old mining ship drifted silently through space, its hull scarred from decades of service in the asteroid belts around distant stars. Originally built to extract rare minerals from lifeless rocks, it had been hastily converted for the most important mission in galactic history. Its cargo bay now contained Emily Watson's makeshift laboratory, filled with paper notebooks, pencils, and a few basic computers that seemed primitive compared to the quantum systems used by other species. Emily floated in the zero-gravity workspace, surrounded by equations she'd written on every available surface. The walls were covered with mathematical formulas, diagrams drawn in simple graphite, and calculations that would have taken alien supercomputers years to process. But Emily had done them by hand in just 2 weeks. Contact in 30 seconds, announced Captain Rodriguez from the pilot's seat. The mining ship's bridge was cramped and utilitarian, designed for function rather than comfort. Through the main view screen, they could see their destination, a region of space where reality itself seemed to bend and twist. The Shadow Plague had stopped moving 3 days earlier, positioning itself in a perfect geometric pattern that Emily recognized as a mathematical invitation. It was ready to communicate, and Emily was the only person in the galaxy who might be able to understand what it wanted to say. "Are you sure about this?" Dr. Keth asked through the communication system. He was monitoring from Research Station Omega along with representatives from every major civilization in the galaxy. "If your calculations are wrong, then we all die anyway," Emily replied calmly. "But I don't think I'm wrong. The plague has been trying to talk to us from the beginning. We just couldn't hear what it was saying." Ambassador Hayes, who had insisted on joining the mission despite protests from the other delegates, checked the basic recording equipment one more time. "Emily, whatever happens in the next few minutes is going to change everything. Are you ready?" Emily looked at her notebooks filled with months of work that had led to this moment. "I've been ready since I was 7 years old, and learned that 2 + 2 always equals 4, no matter what anyone else says." The mining ship crossed into the plague zone, and immediately every advanced system on board began to malfunction. The quantum communicators failed. The computer navigation systems crashed, and even the air recycling unit started working erratically. But Emily's paper notebooks remained unchanged, and the simple pencil she'd brought from Earth continued to work perfectly. "This is it," Emily said, picking up a fresh pencil. "Contact in 3, 2, 1. The universe exploded with mathematics. Information flooded into Emily's mind, not through her ears or eyes, but directly into her consciousness. The Shadow Plague was communicating through pure mathematical concepts, bypassing language and translation entirely. Emily's hand moved across the paper automatically, writing equations she didn't consciously understand but somehow knew were true. Through her mental connection with the plague, Emily saw the approaching threat for the first time. It wasn't a species or a weapon or even a natural phenomenon. It was something far worse. A region of space where the fundamental constants of physics were failing. Reality itself was breaking down, spreading like an infection across the cosmic web that connected galaxies. When normal matter encountered this breakdown zone, it didn't just get destroyed. It got retroactively erased from history, as if it had never existed at all. Entire civilizations would vanish, leaving no trace that they had ever lived or dreamed or built anything. Emily. Captain Rodriguez's voice seemed to come from very far away. Your vitals are spiking. Whatever's happening, your body can't take much more of this. But Emily couldn't stop. The plague was showing her something incredible. A solution that no advanced civilization had thought to consider. The breakdown zone could be stopped, but it required something that went against every instinct of the galaxy's greatest minds. It required surrender. The mathematical truth was elegant and terrifying. The breakdown zone fed on complexity, growing, stronger when it encountered advanced technology, sophisticated civilizations, and complex mathematical systems. But it couldn't process simple, pure mathematics. It couldn't break down something that was already in its most basic form. Emily's hand wrote faster, covering page after page with equations that described a plan so simple it was brilliant. The plague had been trying to save advanced civilizations by relocating them to pocket dimensions, but that was just the first step. The real solution required those civilizations to give up their advanced technology and return to basic mathematical principles. The plague is trying to teach us, Emily said aloud, her voice strange and distant. It's showing us how to become invisible to the breakdown zone. How? Hayes asked. Emily looked up from her notebook, her eyes unfocused from the strain of direct mathematical communication. By becoming primitive again, by going back to the most basic forms of mathematics and physics. The breakdown zone can't process simple truth. Through the communication system, they could hear gasps from the listening delegates. Representative Vex's voice crackled through the static. Dr. Watson, are you suggesting that our advanced civilizations need to abandon millions of years of technological progress? Not abandon, Emily replied, her hand still writing automatically. Transform. The plague is showing me how to convert advanced technology into basic mathematical forms that the breakdown zone can't touch. Dr. Keth's voice carried a note of desperate hope. Can it be done? Can we actually save our civilizations? Emily looked at the equations covering the walls of the mining ship's cargo bay. The mathematics were beautiful in their simplicity, describing transformations that would allow any technology to be expressed in terms so basic that they became invisible to the cosmic threat. Yes, she said, but every civilization in the galaxy has to trust in something they've never believed in before. What's that? Chancellor Nexar's voice joined the communication. They have to trust that sometimes the most primitive solution is the most powerful one. They have to believe that a human woman with a paper notebook can save them all. The plague's communication intensified, and Emily saw the final piece of the puzzle. The transformation wouldn't just save the current generation, it would teach future civilizations how to develop in ways that were immune to the breakdown zone. The galaxy would survive, but it would be fundamentally changed. Emily, Captain Rodriguez called out urgently. We're detecting massive energy fluctuations. Something's happening to the plague. Through the view screen, they watched as the shadow plague began to change. Instead of the dark, consuming force they'd feared for months, it was becoming something else. Light began to emanate from its core, and its movement patterns shifted from the mathematical precision of a warning system to something that looked almost like celebration. It's preparing to implement the solution, Emily said, her voice filled with wonder. It's going to transform every advanced civilization in the galaxy simultaneously. Will we survive the transformation? Hayes asked. Emily looked at her final equation, the one that would determine the fate of trillions of beings across hundreds of worlds. We'll survive, she said, but we'll be different, simpler, more honest, more human. As the plague began its work, converting the galaxy's most advanced technologies into basic mathematical truths, Emily Watson sat in the cargo hold of an old mining ship and smiled. Sometimes the most important discoveries weren't made in advanced laboratories with quantum computers. Sometimes they were made by hand with simple tools, by people who remembered that the universe's most fundamental truths were also its most powerful ones. The galaxy was about to learn what humanity had always known, that strength didn't come from complexity but from understanding simple things deeply. 5 years had passed since the Great Transformation, and the galaxy bore little resemblance to its former self. Where once massive space stations had orbited planets with populations in the billions, now smaller communities thrived on worlds that had been restored to more natural states. The change hadn't been destruction as many had feared, but a fundamental shift toward simplicity that had saved them all. Emily Watson walked through the gardens of New Geneva, a settlement on what had once been called Proxima Prime, the alien. Delegates who had once looked down on humanity now worked alongside humans in communities that prioritized understanding over advancement. The transformation had affected everyone differently, but it had affected everyone. The Vorthak, who had once ruled vast empires with crystal-enhanced intelligence, now found deep satisfaction in growing food and teaching basic mathematics to children of all species. Their crystal formations had become simpler but somehow more beautiful, glowing with the contentment that came from understanding rather than controlling. "Emily," called a familiar voice. She turned to see Dr. Keth approaching, but he looked very different from the formal scientist she'd worked with on Research Station Omega. His blue skin had a healthier glow, and his movements carried the relaxed confidence of someone who had found peace with himself. "How are the new students doing?" Emily asked. Keth smiled, an expression that would have been rare in the old galaxy where his species valued emotional restraint. "They're remarkable. Human children, cryo-young, Etherian sparklings, all learning mathematics together using your methods. The simple honesty of it is changing how they see the universe." Emily nodded, looking at the mixed group of children, playing in the garden while solving basic arithmetic problems written in the dirt with sticks. The plague was right. Complex doesn't mean better. "Have you had any new communications recently?" Keth asked. Emily touched the simple notebook she still carried everywhere, every day. "The plague, or guardian as we call it now, keeps teaching us new ways to express complex ideas through simple mathematics. Yesterday it showed me how to describe quantum mechanics using nothing but addition and multiplication." As they walked through the settlement, they passed workshops where former military engineers worked alongside artists to create tools that were both functional and beautiful. The transformation had somehow removed the artificial barriers between science and art, between practical and aesthetic. Ambassador Hayes, now simply called Dave by everyone in the community, approached them from the direction of the communication center. He looked younger than he had 5 years ago, freed from the stress of navigating galactic politics. "Emily, we just received a message from the Outer Rim settlements. The breakdown zone has completely stopped expanding. In fact, it seems to be shrinking." Emily felt a wave of relief wash over her. "The mathematical transformations are working. Reality is healing itself." The three friends continued walking until they reached the central plaza, where representatives from dozens of species gathered each day to share knowledge and solve problems together. The old hierarchies based on technological advancement had disappeared, replaced by a system that valued wisdom, creativity, and the ability to see simple solutions to complex problems. Representative Vex, the crystalline being who had once dismissed human contributions, approached their group. His form was smaller now, more compact, but the light that emanated from within seemed brighter and more focused. "Dr. Watson," he said, his voice carrying a warmth that would have been impossible in the old galaxy. "I owe you an apology that is 5 years overdue." Emily shook her head. "No apology needed. We all did what we thought was right with the information we had." "But that's exactly the point," Vex replied. "We had all the information, but we couldn't see the truth because we'd convinced ourselves that complex answers were always better than simple ones. You saved us from our own intelligence." Chancellor Nexar, whose crystal formations had grown smaller but more intricate over the years, joined the conversation. "The transformation taught us something profound about the nature of existence itself. Advancement isn't about becoming more complex. It's about understanding simplicity more deeply. Emily pulled out her notebook and showed them her latest calculations. The Guardian has been teaching me about other galaxies, other civilizations, that faced the same choice we did. Most of them chose to fight the breakdown zone with increasingly complex weapons and technologies. What happened to them? Hayes asked, though his expression suggested he already suspected the answer. They were completely erased, not just destroyed, but removed from the historical record as if they had never existed. The breakdown zone fed on their complexity until there was nothing left. Dr. Keth studied the equations in Emily's notebook. But we survived because we chose simplicity over sophistication. More than survived, Emily replied. We evolved. The transformation didn't make us less than we were. It made us more than we thought possible. As if summoned by their conversation, a gentle presence made itself known in Emily's mind. The Guardian was nearby, moving through space in patterns that spelled out mathematical greetings visible to anyone who knew how to. Look, it's here, Emily said softly. The group looked up at the sky where reality seemed to shimmer slightly. To most people, the Guardian was invisible, but those who had learned to see mathematics as a living language could perceive its presence. Emily opened her notebook and began writing, her hand moving in the automatic fashion that had become second nature over the years. The Guardian's message was clear and filled with something that could only be described as joy. What's it saying? Hayes asked. Emily smiled as she read the equations forming on her paper. It's telling us about the next phase, the breakdown zone. Is healing, but that's just the beginning. There are other threats out there, other challenges that will require the kind of thinking we've learned. Are we ready? Chancellor Nexar asked. Emily looked around at the mixed community of beings who had once thought themselves superior to each other, now working together with a harmony that their advanced civilizations had never achieved. We're more than ready. We've learned the most important lesson in the universe, that the greatest strength comes not from building walls of complexity, but from finding the simple truth that connects all things. Representative Vex's crystalline form pulsed with understanding. The galaxy dismissed humanity because you seemed primitive, but primitiveness and simplicity are not the same thing. Exactly, Emily replied. Primitive means you haven't learned yet. Simple means you've learned so well that you don't need complexity anymore. Dr. Keth nodded thoughtfully. In the old galaxy, we measured advancement by how complicated our solutions were. Now we measure it by how elegant they are. As the group continued their discussion, children from a dozen different species ran past them, playing games that were also mathematical lessons, their laughter carrying across the settlement like music. The artificial barriers between work and play, between learning and living, had dissolved along with everything else during the transformation. Emily closed her notebook and looked up at the shimmering sky where the Guardian continued its eternal dance through space-time. You know what the most amazing part is? The Guardian isn't some ancient, super-advanced alien intelligence. It's just the universe's way of protecting itself, like an immune system that activates when reality itself is threatened. And it chose to communicate through human mathematics because our approach was the most compatible with its nature, Hayes added. No, Emily corrected gently. It communicated through human mathematics because we were the only ones still willing to believe that 2 + 2 = 4, no matter how sophisticated our computers got. As the day ended and the settlement's inhabitants prepared for the evening meal that brought everyone together regardless of species or background, Emily reflected on how much had changed. The galaxy had lost its vast empires and planet-sized cities, but it had gained something far more valuable: the wisdom to understand that the most powerful solutions were often the simplest ones. The breakdown zone continued to shrink. Reality continued to heal. And throughout the galaxy, beings who had once competed for dominance now cooperated to solve problems with an elegance that their ancestors could never have imagined. Humanity had given the galaxy the greatest gift possible: the reminder that sometimes the newest voice in the room sees the truth that experience has taught everyone else to ignore. And in settlements across 1,000 worlds, children of every species learned mathematics by drawing in the dirt with sticks, discovering for themselves that the universe's most fundamental truths were also its most beautiful ones. The galaxy had learned to be human, and in learning to be human, it had learned to survive anything the universe could throw at it.